Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia and let's talk books. Today I like to share my July wrap up, and I'm kind of amazed that it's already August, but it is what it is. We gotta keep moving because time does not stop for any of us. In the month of July I read a total of 9 books and kind of all over the place with genres. I took play I participated in Tome Topple, so a lot of the books that I read are actually bigger books rather than smaller ones. So I think that actually helps account for why I read less books than I did last month. In addition, at the very end of July, I went on vacation. And I planned on doing quite a bit of reading on vacation, but I just had so much fun just enjoying Montreal, Quebec City, which is where I was at, and just getting a feel for Canada that I really didn't get a ton of reading done. So unfortunately, didn't get as much reading as I wanted to. But on the plus side, I had a wonderful time in Canada, which is a really wonderful country, and the province of Quebec is absolutely beautiful. And I don't know what it's like over there in the winter, but just with my small experience of it, I'm like, I want to live here. But let's get started with the books that I read in July. So the first book that I finished in July was A Princess in Theory by Alyssa Cole. And it is a new series called the Reluctant Royals series. The second book was just published, and I will be getting a hold of it and reading it eventually because I really like this one. I give it 4 out of 5 stars. It is the story of Naledi and Prince Tabiso. So Prince Tabiso is a prince of a kind of fiction African country, and Naledi was engaged to him when they were kids. Her family, however, left the country, came to the U.S., but soon after coming to the U.S., her parents died in a car accident. So she never knew where she came from. She doesn't know very much about her parents. And so Prince Tabiso, though, he knows that there's this woman out there that he is supposed to have been engaged to that just kind of disappeared. So he finds her and goes to meet her and decides he's not going to tell her who he is. So obviously the tropes are all there. But I really liked following the story of these two. This book grabbed me from the very beginning because Naledi is a PhD student in the STEM fields, and the way she describes her experience in being a PhD student just really struck a chord with me in my experience not in STEM, but in the humanities. And still, there's a lot of parallels from what she describes there and what my experience was. So Alyssa Cole did a really wonderful job of capturing that element in there. So I love that our main character is super smart, super bright. She's a little bit stubborn, which I also identified with. And the prince, Tabiso, he is just wonderful. He is just like, so perfect for her and such a good guy. And there's a few sex scenes in the story, and Alyssa Cole makes a point of putting in consent in there. Like, this is not, like our main character reluctantly agreeing to have sex with a guy or having to be talked into it. No, this is something that both of them go into, like, okay, fully aware and consenting to what happens, which I love in this book. And I'm so looking forward to reading more of Alyssa Cole's books because she's a good writer. And I typically don't read contemporary romance novels. I'm more of a historical romance reader, but I really enjoyed this one, and I think that says something because I typically never pick up contemporaries, which you won't be able to tell by all the current romance novels that are on my TBR list. But anyways, the next 3 books that I finished were for Tome Topple, and so I do have them in part 1 of my July wrap-up. So I will just mention them here very quickly in case you did not watch that video. So the first book that I read for Tome Topple that I finished, actually not the first, I guess it's the last, was American Gods by Neil Gaiman. This was my first Neil Gaiman, and I don't think I would recommend starting with this one. There are large chunks of this book that are just very boring. I did end up giving it 3 out of 5 stars because there's enough in there that I liked. But for my full thoughts, check out that other video. The next book I read as part of Tome Topple as well was A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. And again, more on this in the other video, but she is a historian. And the main character in this series is also a historian. And it just grabbed me. So if you're into history at all, and into vampires and witches and demons, this is definitely a recommend. And finally, another book I picked up for Tome Topple was Kristin Hanna's The Nightingale. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars because it really grabbed me. And even though it's a big book, it was super easy to get into the story and to kind of want to read more and not want to put it down. So that was the only 5-star book I had this month, but I really, really enjoyed it. So do recommend, and I'm glad I finally got to read it. Alright, the next 3 books I read on ebook. So the first one was Soulless by Gail Carriger. And I don't remember who recommended this on YouTube, but I know somebody did. And I picked it up kind of on a whim. It wasn't on my TBR. Well, this book was not even on my radar. But I checked my library, and my library had it available through Overdrive. So I picked it up and I started reading it, and it just was so great. It grabbed me from the very beginning because it has that trope of like the main character is special, and she has these kind of sort of powers, and there's a whole like magical world in the background. The world of Soulless is one in which there are vampires, there are werewolves, and there's these soulless creatures that our main character is. Most of the story involves kind of solving this mystery happening in London. But I just got so caught up in the world of Soulless. The fact that it's in kind of 19th century London, and that in this world, werewolves and vampires and basically magical creatures are known. Like the general public knows about them, and there are kind of special, like special police force that kind of is in charge of controlling and monitoring these creatures. And there's a little bit of a romance story as well. I like when these stories have romance. But if you're not somebody that likes a romance story in kind of your fantasy, this is a very mild romance story. Like, it's there, but it's definitely not like the main driving point. I felt that the kind of mystery to solve was what captured me the most in Soulless. But I absolutely love it. I loved it so much that I immediately started looking into getting the rest of the series. It's a 5-book series, I believe. And I already bought all the other books. Actually, it should be up on a book haul on my channel already, but I'm so glad to have the rest of the series because I want to get to it. So the second ebook that I read in July was Big Little Lies by Liane Moriarti. I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars because there was the mystery in this one caught me as well. Like, it grabbed me and I was interested. I wanted to find out what was going to happen. But the story, or the premise of the story, is that all of these families are in contact with one another. Well, these women are in contact with one another because they're all sending their kids to like the same kindergarten class. And apparently there's a lot of drama behind the scenes. Very little of it actually involves the children. A lot of it is just the parents and the relationships between the parents that creates drama, a lot of times unnecessarily. The other theme in the story is basically that while a suburban community can look perfect on the surface, there's a lot going on underneath the surface, and that is not good. So overall, I felt like there was a lot of cliches in this story. A lot of the character development was not that interesting to me, and so that's why the 3 out of 5 stars. So I needed kind of more interesting character developments, less cliche, but I thought the mystery was really well done, really well handled, and I would be interested in watching the series. So this was made into an HBO series, and Reese Witherspoon, I believe, is headliner on this. So I'm thinking about checking it out. So let me know if you've seen the series and whether you recommend it or not, because if I hear a ton of no's, then I will just save my time and not watch that one. But if I get a lot of yeses, then I will move it up on my to-watch list. So the next book I read on ebook was the most disappointing book of the month. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars, and I feel like that was probably way too generous. And in fact, I probably only gave it 2 out of 5 stars because I actually finished it, but I initially had to force myself to finish it. So the book is Final Jeopardy by Linda Fairstein, and it's the first book in a series. It had been recommended to me years ago by someone in my book club, and I finally picked it out of the library and started reading it, and it was just hard to get into. The premise is that you're following Alexander Cooper, who is a sex crimes DA, district attorney in New York. And so initially that grabbed me. I was like, I love Law and Order SVU. I think I'm gonna like this story. Except this first book in the series was written in, I think, in the 90s sometime. And so there's a lot in the book of her explaining like why, you know, you prosecute some of these crimes, what some of the crimes that she prosecutes are, the complications with them. And for those of us that grew up watching Law and Order SVU, like, that's really redundant. But it probably was not at the time in which this book was published. So I get that. I get that there was and because it's the first in a series, there's a lot of like explaining that is needed. I just felt like it took me out of the story. Because there are large chunks in the middle and towards the end in which he's doing a lot of explaining of something that doesn't feel relevant to the story. She's just talking about this, you know, the prosecution of these crimes, and it has nothing to do with the story. And then on top of that, there were points in the story in which there were some sexist comments, some kind of borderline racist comments, and I know that somebody else reading this book might not pick up on them. But I was sensitive to a couple of them because they just stood out. Like, why is a sex crimes prosecutor having the back of her mind that, oh, maybe this woman, if she had dressed differently, it wouldn't have happened. And like, this is supposed to be a woman's champion lawyer who goes against those kinds of fights, against that kind of thinking. But then in the back of her mind, the author gives her these like really weird thoughts, like that one. And then there's another point at which the main character has to take the subway, and she makes a comment about how she normally hates taking the subway because at that one stop you always see women that just are just dropped off their boyfriends at their trials, and these women with their big hoop earrings supporting their boyfriends. And I was just like, really? Are they Latinas? Do you think all their boyfriends are criminals? Because anyways, I tried to give the book the benefit of the doubt, but it just didn't work for me. Period. It didn't work, and I would not recommend it at all. Especially if you've watched Law and Order SVU, there's nothing this book is going to give you that you haven't already seen done better. Okay, next book that I read, I also have a video on, and that was Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone by J.K. Rowling, and this is a 5 out of 5 star read for me. If you saw my video, you know that this is my first time rereading Harry Potter. I have not picked up this first book since I first read it in middle school. So that's when I started reading Harry Potter, and then every year, you know, anticipating the releases and going to the midnight releases was just so wonderful. But I'm not big on rereading. I very rarely reread books. There's only a handful of books that I make a point to reread. So I thought I would start back up rereading Harry Potter because I've never read my British my UK editions, which, aren't they gorgeous? I picked this up when I was in London ages and ages ago, like so long ago that I don't have the last two books in this edition because they hadn't been released yet. And I somehow never completed the edition. And look at the back. Ooh, Bloomsbury does beautiful editions. And I like them better than the American editions. Also note that it's the Philosopher's Stone, not the Sorcerer's Stone, and in the American editions it says the Sorcerer's Stone. But anyways, I had a wonderful experience rereading Harry Potter. I cried, I laughed, and it was really great. I'm so glad that I started rereading them, and I can't wait to pick up the second and the rest of the books because it was just really neat when you go back and read something that was really meaningful when you were younger and is still meaningful to you. So yeah. Last book that I read in July was another romance, His Perfect Partner by Pricilla Oliveras. And this was a really cute, really nice romance. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I think I kind of rounded it up because I really love the way Pricilla Oliveras talks about, I believe the main characters are Puerto Rican, so about like Latin communities and the way that like family is such a huge part of like Latin culture. I have felt that in my family, and so seeing it represented in a romance novel was just really, really neat. I really love the main character, Jasmine Fernandez. She is, I think she's the oldest in this family, and she has dreams of becoming a dancer in New York, and she has already been in some like musical theater in New York, but she had to come back home because her dad was diagnosed with cancer and somebody had to take care of him, and her 2 youngest sisters are about to finish college and start their professional careers. So basically she just kind of volunteered for the job. And she's back in her hometown teaching dance classes, and she meets one of her students' father. So if you have been looking for a story about a single father, this is really cute. I like the way they handled why the mom wasn't there. Like, it wasn't that she was dead. The mom's very much alive, but not present, and there's no chance of her ever being present. So I thought that was well done. And I just the way the Latinx cultures are represented here is just really neat. It was really great to see. Really cute romance. The story and the chemistry between the 2 main characters really worked for me. There's some Spanish in here. Not enough that if you don't speak Spanish, it's going to take you out of the story. Like, it's always translated, and in context, I think it would make total sense to everybody. But it was really neat to see the sprinkling of Spanish because that felt very true to my experience. Like, if I'm around family or if I'm around other Latinos, there's some of that Spanglish going on. So I felt very immersed in that, in the world of his perfect partner. This is the first in a series, so I can't wait to continue with the series. It's the Match to Perfection series, and I believe the second one was already released. What was really neat is that I actually really fell in love with one of the other sisters, because the series is going to follow the Fernandez sisters, and one of them I think I'm the most like, and I can't wait to read her story. So I'm really looking forward to the other ones. One more thing about this book is that if you are somebody that doesn't like romance because you don't like reading like sex scenes, this book doesn't have any. There's chemistry and there's a physical connection between the main characters, but there's no sex scenes. So FYI, because I think this is the first romance novel in a while that I've read that doesn't have any sex scenes, and I know it can make some people uncomfortable. So just FYI that there are none here. But that was excellent read for me. I am currently reading something that I had hoped would be done by July, but didn't get done. So we'll see in the next one. I'm reading The Plague by Albert Camus. So look out for a video on that book. But yeah, I think overall it wasn't a terrible reading month. There was one terrible book, but all of these, or a lot of these, ended up being 4- and 5-star reads, which is not an accident. I haven't had as much time as I have had this summer to just sit down and read fiction. So I've been reading books that I've been meaning to read for a long time and that I know are pretty good. So that skews my stats a little bit here. But I'm really looking forward to August and to what that reading experience will be like. So I don't usually do TBRs, but I think I will do one for August. So watch out for that one as well. But thank you so much for sticking it to the end of this video with me. Hopefully you'll stick around, watch some of my other videos, and let me know what you have read that you've really been enjoying in July. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.